Back today, Monday morning, I am with a guest from Charlottesville, Virginia. Jim Harshaw is with me. Jim is the founder of Jim Harshaw Jr. Performance Coaching. He's also the host of Success Through Failure podcast, and he's a former D1 wrestler. Today, Jim and I are here to talk about failure and embracing failure and all that it can do to serve us in our lives. So, Jim, thanks for being with me today.
Yeah, Dave, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, we just went through Virginia, not Charlottesville, but we dropped my son off down in South Carolina to Coastal Carolina University, first year in college, and then came back through Virginia. That's my old stomping grounds. I used to live down there.
Yeah. Where'd you live?
We lived in Richmond, which is, I think,
Yeah, about
an
an hour
hour
from me.
range. So let's just get into this. So I know you do a ton on this, and I can't help but to think that your background as a wrestler played a major role in what you do today, but I'll let you kind of flesh that out. But tell us a little bit about what your company does, why you started this podcast, and why you frame a lot of what you do around this whole concept of failure.
Yeah, the story really begins when I was a kid. I grew up in the Pittsburgh area, small town, blue collar family, and never really saw much of a future for myself. Never achieved any of my goals in wrestling, and my goal was to win a Pennsylvania state championship. Matter of fact, I never even got on the podium. Luckily, I got good grades and had some coaches who believed in me and saw me train, and so I got recruited to the University of Virginia and showed up, and everybody there at UVA had more money than me. They were smarter than me. They were better looking than me. It just sort of reinforced my self-doubt of my potential. And fast forward 5 years, and I was a completely changed person. I'm a Division I All-American. I'm one of the best in the country at what I do. I was an Olympic hopeful. I was invited to live and train at the Olympic Training Center. I had 2 degrees, including a master's degree from the number 1 public university in the country. I mean, just complete transformation, Dave. And that sets me off on this sort of trajectory for success. Actually became the youngest Division I head wrestling coach in the country, coached for about a dozen years, Division I. And then I got out of coaching, started my first business, and that was a success. And then started my second business, and I thought that was going to be the business that really sets my family up for the long term. And then I ended up with that business. That was a total failure. Had debt up to our eyeballs, failed business, wasn't spending enough time with my wife or my kids. I was in the worst physical shape of my life. And I was at that point, I was broken, for lack of a better description. And I remember as I was closing down that business, thinking to myself, like, there were certain things in my life when I was competing that allowed me to be resilient, allowed me to handle failure, but learn from it and be better because of it, not despite it, but because of it. Well, there was this structure that was in place in my life then. At that moment, there was sort of 4 sort of clear steps kind of came to mind, and I realized that was what was, helping me, be resilient and strong and do really extremely hard things and find success through failure. And so I started putting those things back in place in my life then and transformed me. I tripled my income and healed my relationship with my wife and started spending more time with my kids and just, got physically fit again. I'm, in the best shape of my life now outside of, my time as an athlete. And it was just transformational for me. And I kind of thought that this was just a gym thing, it just worked for me. And then I started looking at other people who I grew up with. Luckily I grew up around a lot of people who were high performers, and a couple of my friends went on and won Olympic gold medals and world medals, and these were just world-class performers. And I realized, wait, this structure was in place in their lives too. And then I did this TEDx talk titled "Why I Teach My Children to Fail," and that led me to starting the podcast. And I started interviewing these Navy SEALs and Olympic champions and New York Times best-selling authors. And I'm like, there's like a pattern here. Like there's this structure, this framework in their lives that is the same framework that worked for me when I was competing, and that I put in my place in my life now as an adult. And this is like this universal framework for success. And that's when I put a curriculum together. I have a master's in teaching, so I leveraged that and put together a curriculum, started coaching it and leading people through it. Man, it just really clicks with people. And that's my mission today now in the world, Dave, is to share that with as many people as possible.
Yep. So, the whole concept of failure for me, or to me, and I want to get your take on this. I feel like it's misunderstood. I feel like everybody has their own definition of what it means to be a failure or to fail. And I really think it really only comes down to one thing. To me, if you just quit, if you stop trying, to me, that's failure.
Sure.
So when you think about all that you went through, think about your mindset as a kid growing up in Pittsburgh. As soon as you opened your mouth, I started thinking of that song Allentown by Billy Joel. And I don't know how
Right.
close Allentown is to Pittsburgh.
It's
But
on the
how
other
much
side of the state, but similar sort of blue collar mentality, steel town kind of places. Yep.
Right. So you kind of grow up, it sounds like you grew up feeling like you just weren't gonna make it. And then somewhere along the way as an adult, you had a different view of it. What happened to cause you to just look back and say, wait a minute, all of this stuff that I was doing is actually the answer. Why did you get away from that answer? What caused you to wake up and say, I got to go back to that?
Yeah, interesting. Like I didn't know that the process had happened. Like when I finally became an All-American wrestler and achieved my goal in front of 15,000 people at the NCAA championships my senior year, I had everybody kind of looks at that moment and go, wow, Jim is just successful. It kind of comes easy for him. But what they don't realize is that my freshman year, my goal is to be an All-American. I made it to the national championships, but I lost. Sophomore year, qualified for the national championships again. Again, I failed. Junior year, pretty much a repeat of the prior 2 years where I got to the national championships, but I failed to achieve my dream. And, so there's all this series of failures. And I at the end of my junior year, my face buried in a towel in tears, wondering like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? I can't possibly work any harder, right? And your listeners, I mean, they're people we're working hard, we're busy, right? And I was the same way. I was like, I couldn't possibly run more miles or lift more weights or watch more film. There's not enough hours in the day. I can't do more. So I'm like, I dedicated my off season to figuring out what is it that I'm missing? Like, what is it that I'm lacking? Do I need to get more physically stronger? Do I got to get in better condition? Do I need to learn new techniques? So what is it, right? So I dedicated that off season to traveling around to wrestling camps, to these different universities, and they bring in like the Olympians and the best out there to sort of teach clinics and teach the attendees. And I'm just a counselor. And I'm like, but I'm just trying to pick their brains, right? And I got to the next season, and it was the night before our first competition, and I'm sitting in the hotel room, and it hits me. I never figured it out. I never discovered that thing that I'm missing that is going to help me become successful, to help me finally break through. And so at that moment, literally in that moment, Dave, sitting in the hotel room, I gave up. I gave up on the outcome. I said, you know what? I'm going to put everything I have into this. And my goal is still the same, to become an All American, actually be a national champion. That doesn't change, but I can't control that. I've tried for years. So all I can do is all I can do. I let go and said, you know what? I'm just going to focus on the process. I'm going to go out. I'm going to compete as hard as I can with every fiber of my soul, every match. And if I win, I win. If I lose, I lose. I can't do more. So I woke up the next day. I went 5-0, dominated the competition, and that set me off for my senior season, where I had so much fun competing. Like, wrestling became fun again for me. And wrestling's not a
Yeah.
fun sport. There's no ball. You don't play. It's like it's kind of miserable, right? But it's satisfying, right? But I found the fun in it again. And and that, putting down the fear of failure and allowing myself just to perform at my best, win or lose, released this weight that I had carried around me for years, and it allowed me to perform at my best. And I would
Right.
love to tell you, Dave, that like at the end of that season, I realized it was this epiphany where I just, learned this success through failure lesson, but I didn't. I was 22 years old, and I just hadn't had the perspective on it yet until,
Yep.
I had some of these glimpses were coming out, and it made me a better coach because I wasn't the guy who just everything kind of, came easier to, or was just like successful my whole life. I had dealt with significant failure along the way to finally get to the top of the mountain. But
Yep.
it wasn't until years later, until I'm in my mid 30s as an adult, and I have a wife and kids, and experience this same level of failure. Only the stakes are higher when we're adults, right? You got family and kids and everything. It wasn't until that deep dark moment where I'm laying in bed next to my wife, staring at the ceiling, saying like, what was in place in my life then that I need to have in place in my life now? And it was that moment where I had that epiphany of like, oh, like failure's okay. It's part of the process. It really sucks. It hurts. It's not
Yeah.
fun. I wasn't looking for this, but
Yeah.
maybe I can move through this if I put this framework in place. And then it was even after that when I realized, like, okay, this is just part of the process. And sometimes our deepest, darkest failures, they're the catalyst for success. I was listening to one of your recent episodes where it was another gentleman you had on. He had broke his back. He had an accident. And he was a stunt man, and he talked about his worst. It was best and worst moment. I think he says best day and his worst day because he broke his back. Now he's paralyzed and he's in the hospital and his career is supposedly over. But in hindsight, it was the greatest thing that ever happened to him, right? And that's the trick. That's the trick. Can you go, okay, this I failed, right? It was hopefully not a catastrophic failure, but maybe it was this failure like your guest had, like I've had, like your listeners have had or having or have had. And you go, okay, this is part of my process. This is part of my story. Like, how do I find the value in this? What is this the catalyst for?
Well, I think success is so relative and failure is so relative, right, Jim? I mean, like I think about wrestling as a kid. Um, I remember in high school, freshman year, a couple of the guys on the wrestling team asked me if I would try out for the wrestling team because I was effectively wrestling with them in gym class and doing well. And my reason for not doing it beyond just pure laziness was simple. I am not going to wear that singlet. I am not going to walk. And so for me at the time, I couldn't get beyond that. And so I never did it. And as far as I'm concerned, I failed as a result of it. My son later on, who just went to college, freshman year in high school, he decided to wrestle, and he was my size. So I watched him walk out on the mat in that singlet, which is, by the way, they don't even wear them anymore now up here. But I was looking at him like, my God, that's me, 30 something years ago. But like to me, that would have been success at the time, being able to walk out there not being embarrassed. So I listened to you, I'm trying to put myself back into that place where forget about wrestling, forget about championships and losing in the championship. All I'm thinking at the time is, Jim, how the hell did you put on that singlet? But today in life, when you think about the work you do today, I'm sure a lot of the people that you work with, that I work with, they've already kind of faced some failure and adversity and learned to deal with it. But there are a lot of people out there that just never even face that one thing. So how do you reconcile that, or how do you get somebody that doesn't even think they can take off their shirt or put on a singlet to even consider, like, to them that it's an impossibility to relate to you or to relate to me? How do you even get them into the conversation?
Yeah, well, I mean, fear is what holds us back, and everything, all of our success, all the things that we want, they're on the other side of fear. And fearing failure, I mean, it comes in a lot of different forms, right? Whether it's, I don't want to sign up for that 5K because I don't think I can finish a 5K, or I don't want to start that business, or because I'm afraid of what I don't know, right? Or I don't want to ask my boss for the raise, or whatever it might be. But when, the way I try to engage people in this conversation about failure is like, remember when you learned how to ride a bike? Maybe you do, or maybe you don't remember that day, but like, you fell down, you skinned your knee. Like, you had to fail in order to learn how to ride your bike. You had to fail. Like, we don't remember those days, but when we learn how to walk, like, we fell a lot. Like, that is part of the process. Like, when you listen to some of these guests on my podcast they're world-class performers, I always ask them, tell me about a time when you failed. And oh man, like some of these stories that come out, Dave, it's like, oh, so you actually had to fail to get to where you're at, right? Like,
Yes.
it is just what you do. And when you look at people who are good at something, it's just that they've failed their way to the other side of it. I don't care what it is. And when we look at, say, sales, right? Anybody who's listening who works in sales right now, like, think about your first sales call you ever made. Pretty bad. Think about your third one. Probably a little better, right? How about the 10th one? How about the 100th one? Like, by 100, you're pretty good. But you can't get to 100 without going through 1 and 2 and 3. Like, that is the only way to do it. You have to fail your way to get there, no matter what you're doing. Like in wrestling, I had to fail. And listen, if I wasn't failing, that meant I was just wrestling lower level competition and I wasn't getting better. And that's fine. But you know what? If you want to excel at something, you have to put yourself into positions where you're going to fail, because you do want to seek it out. You want to put yourself into positions where you can fail, and you're not trying to go there and go, okay, I'm going to go out and fail. You're going to try and do your best. You're going to try and win or succeed. But if and when you fail, you go, okay, that sucked. I won't do it that way again, right? Or I need to prepare better next time. Or gosh, I didn't see that coming, but next time I will. And now you're smarter, you're wiser, you're more experienced. And but when you look back at life and you go, okay, learning how to walk, learning how to ride my bike, those are two things we all agree upon and go, oh yeah, I had to fail to get there. Well, you're gonna have to fail to get to that next level of yourself now as well.
Are we mislabeling what failure is as people, though? Why does losing equal failure? Why does coming in second? Why does whatever? Like I did well, but I missed my target by 1%, but I still did 20% better than I did last year. Why do we internalize that as failure?
Yeah, because but when we focus on the outcome only, and that is one of the big challenges of our society today these days, is like we push our kids so hard, and like you have to be like in my sport of wrestling, like you got to be an 8-year-old national champion or you're not any good. It's like no, no,
Hmm.
no, no.
Right.
Like let's focus on the process here of making this young person a better human being. It's okay to fail along the process, and to understand that you got to try things. Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, he said, great quote. He said, "If you're not embarrassed by your first iteration, you've launched too late." Like you
Yep.
you've got to like press the button, hit go, commit to the thing, sign up for the program, buy the book, whatever it is. Like take the step and understand that you know it's okay to fail. Like focus on the process, because listen, I'll put it in sports terms. Like if in that big match where I won and became an All-American, or I beat the fourth ranked wrestler in the country and the number one ranked team in the country and at the national championships, like if I had to wrestle, let's say the best wrestler in the world, the Olympic gold medalist, and I wrestled the same match. I wrestled at the best match of my life. I wrestled the match of my life, but I lost. I mean, is that a failure? Because I still did my maximum, right? Is that
Right.
really failure, or is that just like is failure, and really is the outcome almost irrelevant at that point? Because
Right.
I've heard people say this, and I hate when I see this. Like results are the only thing that matters. No, bull crap.
Right.
Results aren't the only thing that
Yep.
matters, because I can cheat and get an A on a test, right? Or I can
Yep.
have short term bad results because I'm doing things. I'm sorry, I can have short term good results and kind of get away with some things and cutting some corners. But in the long term, that's not
Yep.
going to help me. Right? It's not the outcome that matters. It's the process that matters. And the whole cliche of it's not with whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. And it's cheesy, it's cliche, but it's true. Because if you play at
Right.
your maximum, if you compete at your maximum, if you perform at your maximum, if be a father, a husband, a son, a daughter, a brother, a sister, whatever it is, like at your maximum, if you do all the right things to the best of your ability, you give yourself the best chance at success, at being a parent, a business
Right.
owner, whatever it is. And there are going to be things that are outside of your control, right? There are going to be, cars break down, kids get sick, global pandemics happen. That's
Right.
those things can happen.
Well, is failure does failure kind of come about because of comparison or competition? For example, in wrestling, you've always got a competitor, but the biggest competitor is right here. But you've always got somebody that you'll either defeat in the match, or you'll lose to in the match. And is it because you're measured against someone or something? Maybe my neighbor's car is nicer than my car. Is that failure? Are they better than me? Or is it comparison and
Yeah.
competition that drives this
Yeah, you
mindset?
see that. Yeah, that's it, right? We're always comparing ourselves, and it's great to, as Stephen Covey said, start with the end in mind, right? You have the goal, right,
Yeah,
of making
yeah,
the income that you want to make, of winning the competition, whatever. Like you start with the end in mind, and then
Yeah.
and then you follow your own process. And but when you start looking at others, that's when you start, you know, not competing against yourself, because it's all about competition against yourself. It's me against
Yeah.
me, it's you against you. And whenever you compete that way and live your life that way, gosh, it feels so good to put down the burden of comparison, because that's not going to help
Right.
you. Like you
Right.
said, like look, you know, you look at your neighbor's driveway and see what's parked in their driveway. It's like, don't compare yourself to that, right? What's your
Right.
process? Are you maximizing your potential? Like, are you making the number of sales calls you need to make in a day? Are you reading? Are you continuing to engage in self growth? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you working out? Are you putting the right food and fuel in your body? Are you being a, you know, a great, you know, mother or father? Like, are you focused on those things? And because listen, when we pull back the curtain, you look at that car in your neighbor's driveway, and you pull back the curtain on their life, they're struggling with something too. But you know, there's a great quote by Jackson Brown, the author. He said, everybody in life has loved something, has lost something, and is afraid of something. And when you realize that about everybody else around you, it makes you go, okay, everybody's normal. I don't need to compare myself to somebody else. I don't need to compare myself to what's parked in their driveway, or whatever job they got or the vacation they took. It's like, no, it's they're struggling with their own things. You're struggling with your own things. Be the best version of you.
So a lot of it, you know, to me, is as you're talking about this. I mean, isn't it a lot? Doesn't it come down to let's just look ahead into the future? Use that Stephen Covey quote, for example. Begin with the end in mind. If the end scares you and you say, "Screw that, I don't want to face that," then it's not going to work. But if beginning with the end in mind is let's face the possibility of discomfort. Let's face the possibility of embarrassment. Let's face the possibility of feeling ashamed, and let's see how we deal with that. Is that part of the problem? Is that part of the process? Is let me just face what I think the worst thing is first, and then I can go do it. So when I see it in reality, I've already mentally dealt with it. Is that part of the process in
Yeah,
your mind?
yeah. If you can become, you know, desensitize yourself almost to that, right? If you can normalize the process of failure. I mean, sales, right? You know, people like if I can
Yeah,
get used to, you know, getting no's, if I can get used to that, then I'm okay with that. You've got to get used to it. Like when you read these books and hear these interviews of world class performers, gosh, Elon Musk, you know, he's kind of the big guy in the news here the last several years, and probably going to be for a while longer.
yeah,
Like when you read his book and hear about all of the failures along the way, like all the embarrassments. I mean, oh my goodness. I mean, the press. I mean, people tearing him to shreds for the bad decisions he made and the bad investments and doing things the wrong way. Like it's hard to take, man. I don't know about you, Dave, but I don't want to be shredded by the national press and people telling me I'm an idiot and narcissistic and all these like things that like he just had all that stuff heaped upon him. But that's part of his process of changing the world. I mean, you know, giving us Tesla and SpaceX, and you know, I just heard yesterday another missile, you know, or another rocket was launched with the Dragon capsule, like on the way to the International Space Station. Like he's changing the world, but he had to do
yeah.
it through failure, through putting on the wrestling singlet and stepping out in front of people, through doing the thing that's embarrassing when you fail.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that you take a guy like Elon Musk, who you know he's got years and years and years of being passionate about ideas, trying things. So you know, being scrutinized by the press to him, it's like he's probably you don't know what you're talking about. Like they have no idea what's underneath his process, so he's unfazed by it. But if you take somebody who's never taken a chance and they go out once and fail and they get scrutinized by their best friend or their boss, that might be enough to say, I'm out. And Elon Musk, I think what differentiates him and anybody, even you as a wrestler, you chose to be a wrestler. You chose to put yourself through those grueling practices. You chose to put on that outfit. You chose to sometimes get your butt kicked, and then sometimes learn to be uncomfortable, getting your what's it called
Crossface, where you're getting a
when you
bloody
get
nose, and
oh I
oh
hate the
man, yeah,
crossface.
it's rough.
Ah, I hate the crossface. So I mean, you chose all those things so that when you went into the ring, each time you went into the ring, you were more prepared for anything, the crowd, the pain, the embarrassment of a loss or whatever it is. You were more built for it. But think about all the people that don't even take that
Yeah.
first chance because they internalize, like, it's just too hard for them to deal with. You bring up the first sales call. It's so funny you said that. As soon as you said that, it brings me back to August of 1995. I walked into a realtor's office, and the guy couldn't have been nicer to me. But basically, it was his way of getting rid of me. And I thought it was great. I'm like, what a nice guy. I went back to the office, and my boss goes, yeah, he's like that to everybody. Well, ironically, my wife is in real estate. She's part-time in real estate. This guy calls her the other day, and he says, are you related to Dave Turano? And she said, yeah, that he's my husband. He said he called on me literally 26 years ago, but he remembers me in a positive light. It was probably just a note he put in the system, but it's just so funny because at the time I thought, wow, this guy's a nice guy, but he never used me for anything. So like it just goes to show that at the time I thought it was a success, but really at the end it was a failure. So go back to just go back to like success for a second. Tell me how you would define success.
Success to me is living your life the way you want to live it. Like not living your life
Yeah.
the way your parents want you to live it or social media tells you or what you see in the mass media, but living your life in alignment with who you are. And really this is success. This is about how you become resilient and deal with failure along the way. And I mentioned the 4 steps, and that's actually the process. And I'll share those 4 steps if I could right now, Dave. So
Yeah.
because this is when you
Sure.
put these 4 steps in your life, when you put this 4 step framework in place in your life, this is what high performers, world class performers do. It allows you to create success, have balanced success, and and also be resilient and deal with failure. And by the way, I will say that I don't think an Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs, the late Steve Jobs, lived with this framework. I think they did in some ways. Theirs was more single-minded focus. Like when I was an athlete, I had a single-minded focus. That's okay. Then I've got 4 kids
Yeah.
now. You've got kids. Like we got the stakes are higher. There are more things pulling at our time. So here's how the framework works. So number one, when I was competing, I knew what was important to me. Like I knew what I valued. I probably couldn't have stated those things as core values like I can today, but I wanted to be tough and I wanted to be disciplined and I wanted to be respected like these people who I looked up to who are my mentors and my coaches through the years. And they often went on to success after wrestling. Like that's what I valued. That was step one. And then step two
Yep.
is I had goals that aligned with those values. Not goals that aligned with my parents' values,
Hmm.
not goals that aligned with my coaches or my teammates' value. Like these were Jim's values, and my goals were perfectly in alignment with those values. And and in the real world, it was sort of one goal: win the national championship. But in the real world,
Hmm.
back then it was different in sports. But in the real world, it's got to be different areas. So the 4 areas where I set goals with my clients: relationships, self, health, and wealth. Like those 4 categories.
Yep.
That creates balanced success, right? So goals that align with your values. That's the second step. Now the third step is this. It's nice to have those core values identified that are your compass, and then the goals that drive you. And then the third step is what I call the environment of excellence. Like when I was competing, I was surrounded by other people who were trying to achieve the same things, right? And failure was normal. I saw them fail. I saw them try. I saw them go for big things and try to do really hard things and sometimes fail. So that was normalized, right? In the sense that like we're all trying to do the same thing, and failure is part of the process. I had coaches who picked me up when I needed picked up and dusted off, kick me in the rear end when I needed that. They helped me see my blind spots. I had sports psychologists, athletic trainers, strength and conditioning coaches, nutritionists, on and on. Like this was my environment of excellence. Like I had other people around me, and when you look at world class athletes, you go, okay, yeah, that environment is like sort of built in. It's there by default. Guess what? In the real world, it's not. Like we have to be intentional about it. We're
Hmm.
surrounded by mediocrity, and we have to look for the people who are achieving the things that we want to achieve and intentionally inserting ourselves into those communities, becoming part of those communities, right? Whether it's a workout and fitness community, whether it's a sales group or a sales mastermind, or whether it's, you know, a church is another one like that. I mean, putting yourself around other like-minded people who are living their lives in the way that you want to live your life. And that's what I had. I had that. So whenever I
Yeah.
failed and struggled with things, there were people to help me, understand those failures, decipher, what went right, what went wrong, people who can, encourage me along the way. Like, there's a structure there. Right. So that's the third step. But the fourth
Yeah.
step is this, like, because a lot of people, people, not the first person to say set goals, right? I think my system, my framework's a little bit unique here, but the fourth and final piece, this, everybody misses this. Like, you have to have a plan to follow through when the crap hits the fan. Like, like when I was competing,
Mhm.
if, if I lost a wrestling match on Saturday, coach is like, "Hey, Jim, I'll see you tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock in the weight room, team lift." Whether, I'm over there sulking by myself, and it's like,
Yep.
I don't want to show up
Yep.
at the team lift tomorrow, but guess what? You have to. Like, there's a
Yep.
plan there for follow
Yep.
through. And well, in the real world, guess what? You could have
Yeah.
these great plans and goals and everything in place, and like, kids get sick, cars break down, global pandemics happen, and it throws people off. If you don't have that
Yeah.
plan, that
Yeah.
systematic plan for following through, even when things go wrong, they will, then, people go, I set goals, but I just can't seem to make them stick. I'm good for a few months, and then I
Yeah.
fall off and I don't achieve my goals. Well, you have to have this systematic plan, and that's what I teach people to do.
Yeah, I think it ties back to that whole values piece that you started with. But at the end of the day, you want to be successful at anything. You better want it. You better want something more than you've ever wanted it before. No matter whether it's a good marriage or a happy family or a great job. If you really want it, the next question for me is, are you willing to do the things that make you uncomfortable? Are you willing to say things that make you uncomfortable? Are you willing to face things that make you uncomfortable? You talk about the kids, and that's all I ever wanted as a parent and still do as a parent. I just want confident adult
Yeah.
children. That's what I want. I want confident adult children that are happy in life. And the only way in my mind to get them there is to show them things in life that might be uncomfortable. There are people that aren't always going to say what you want them to say. Not everyone's going to accept you. Not every teacher is going to like you. Not every coach is going to be nice to you, and that's life. And helping them see that not everyone is there to prop you up, and be okay with that. And to me, I think that has a lot to do with it. Is how committed are you to what you want, and how willing are you to embrace the things that are going to get in your way. And I think if we can start looking at those obstacles or those setbacks or those insults or whatever it is as learning opportunities to embrace, like, wow, I got somebody else who shot me down. That's a good thing. Or I just lost another match. I'm that much closer. I just learned something. There's a reason I lost that match, and embrace it as a learning opportunity instead of marking it. It's you're tattooed with a scarlet letter that permanently nobody. And I think that's the thing for me, like listening to you talk, it's how do we help people not permanently tattoo themselves as a failure when it's a
Yeah.
complete
Yeah.
misdiagnosis? Thoughts? Or am I ranting?
Yeah.
Am I ranting
No,
too
this is
much?
this is this is you're exactly right. Like one thing that people think is like like you mentioned, you got to want it, right? You've got to want it, right? You got to be willing to go through the failures over and over to get to where you want to go. If I was when I was wrestling, if I didn't have a teammate, like teammates, a group of 30 other guys who were trying to achieve the same things, I would not have been able to get there, right? So, when I failed, it wasn't like kick Jim off the team, like, no, it was that's part of the process, right? Hey, Jim, you can get him next time. You'll see him again at the conference tournament, whatever it is. Like, you have those people around you. Like, you have coaches helping you break down the film. You have nutritionists, like, hey, you know what? Let's dial in your nutrition a little bit differently here. Like, you've got a plan. Like, when you have this structure in place, it enables you to want it. It enables you to be able to get up one more time every time. And then when we have
Yep.
conversations like we're having right now, and the listeners are getting to listen to an episode about talking about failure and normalizing it, that enables you to go, oh, so it's not just me. Like, so okay, so I failed last week or last month or last year or 10 years ago, whatever it is. So that's normal. Okay, so that's not just like there's something wrong with me. It's actually a normal thing. And for me, when I got a chance to give this TEDx talk, I was driving to work one day. Matter of fact, the whole thing started from a failure. So I was really bad at public speaking and got really nervous in front of crowds. Like, I think it's the biggest fear they say out there, right? As anybody has is fear of speaking in public. And I was speaking, and
Right.
just for a few seconds, really, somebody handed me a microphone. There's like 200 people turned and looked at me, and I could feel my heart like this, and you could hear my nervousness in my voice. I'm like, this isn't gonna fly. I mean, I got to change
Yep.
this. Sign up for Toastmasters, practice my speaking, got a little bit better at it. About 6 or 9 months later, I'm driving to work one morning, and I hear that there's a Charlottesville TEDx event. It's one of the top 1% of biggest TED events in the world, and they're looking for one community speaker, and you can apply. And they say deadline is today. You have to have your video application in by 5 o'clock today, and it's going to be a 2 minute or less video. And I'm like, oh man, that's awesome. That sounds like a good idea, like really cool thing to apply to do. Probably a bunch of people are going to apply, but I'll throw my hat in the ring. So I I was like, what am I going to teach? Like, what would I speak about? And I was like, man, failure, like success through failure, like why teach my kids to fail. And I thought about my wrestling life as a wrestler, and all the pain and suffering and failure that led to success. So I shot my quick video, submitted it. They took 65 applicants, whittled it down to 25. We did an open mic night, and sort of did an audience vote in front of about 500 people in the audience, and the audience voted, and I won. And then so I got to speak at the main TEDx event in Charlottesville. But that's where that came from, right? I had to teach what I needed, right? I knew that success through failure was a
Yep.
thing, but I'll be honest, it was more of a logical thing. Like, we all know this, the listeners, you, me, like, we know, everything we say, everything we're talking about, like, okay, yeah, I know people, really
Yep.
amazing people, they fail too. We see these, the Tom Brady's of the world. Like, yeah, he's lost football games also. Like, we see that, but that's okay for other people, because when it happens to me, it actually hurts.
Right.
It actually means that I'm no good. It means that
Yep.
I am a failure. So we have to take it from
Right.
this logical understanding of this concept that you and I are talking about right now, of success through failure, and connect it to our emotional being. We have to understand this at
Yes.
an emotional level. So we have to do that. We do that by being aware, right? So for the listener, think about that thing that you want to try, right? That thing that you want in your life that you're afraid to do, you're afraid to try it. Maybe it's speaking in front of a group, maybe it's writing that book or starting your own podcast or asking your boss for that promotion, like whatever it is, like whatever that is, like do it, like schedule it, like attempt it. And then if you fail, or if you fail in the process of getting there, of trying that thing, like journal on it or speak out loud about it. Go, boy, I failed. I feel embarrassed right now. But this is actually part of the. I know that this is part of the problem. It doesn't feel good. I want to just stop or quit or not do it again. But I'm more equipped now. Like, this is part of my process. This is part of my story. I'm better now because of it, not despite it. And so if you can bring it from this unconscious, subtle, feeling inside of us to the surface level, where you can shine a light on it and evaluate it and say, oh, okay, like this is that thing I heard those guys on that podcast talking about. Like, it's actually happening to me right now, and I'm about to quit or not go back to and try that thing again. But no, this is okay. This is what they're talking about. I'm going to go do it again.
Right. And it comes back to seeking out that feeling. I've trained so many salespeople over the years as well. You bring up sales a couple times here. Every salesperson has to know what it's like to feel uncomfortable, to feel like a pest, to have somebody not want to talk to them. And it comes down to, go out and find somebody that you repel. Go out and find somebody that you pissed off. Go out and find somebody that doesn't want to talk to you. Then let's talk about it. Or in wrestling, go out and get winded. Go out and lose your energy. Go out and get cross-faced and get a bloody nose, and then come back and let's talk about it. You've got to be seeking that as a
Yep.
victory, right? And not avoiding that as an embarrassment or a black mark. And I think we have to just change the way. I mean, I could go on and on with you about the way we teach kids in school. We are measuring the wrong things.
Agreed.
Always in wins and losses and A's and B's and money and cars. It's like no, 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 no. The most successful people in life have been through hell and back, and they've learned to embrace the hell as the learning opportunity. You got me wound up
I'm with you, man.
here, Jim. I'm
I
sorry.
love this stuff. People need to hear it.
So tell me, what haven't we covered? What haven't we covered? What should we be talking about, or how do you want to tie this up so that the listener walks away with an actionable
let me give you this.
thought?
So, there's this idea we're talking about, right, of success through failure, and I gave you this framework. But here's the challenge. Most people are going to listen to this podcast episode. They're going to be done with it, and they're going to go on with their day, right? They're going to go back to checking their email or whatever they're going to do after this. And that's not going to make change. So I've done 300 and some podcast episodes now over the past 6 years, interviewing, again, these world-class performers. And I always ask them, tell me about a habit that you most credit for your success. And, for the New York Times bestselling author, you'd think it would be some kind of writing habit, right? For the Olympic gold medalist, you'd think it would be some kind of, something about their training. But it's not. It's never the thing that you would expect it to be. It's always something like this. It's always something like, I plan my week in advance. Every Sunday, I spend a half an hour at my computer and I plan my week in advance. Or it's journaling. I journal once a week, or every day, or something like that. Or something like this. They say, once a year, my wife and I, we take a retreat and we kind of look at our year in the past and we look at the year ahead and we kind of plan. It's always some version of stepping off the treadmill of life. It might be working with a mentor. It might be working with a coach, right? It's never doing the thing. And it hit me when I was competing. If someone would say, hey, Jim, what was the most valuable single hour of your entire season? It was never in the weight room. It was never in the practice room. It wasn't watching film. It was always that 1 hour that I would spend in my coach's office. My coaches, assistant coaches, we gather around. We talk about what are Jim's goals for the year? What's the plan for the year? It wasn't doing. Well, I wasn't training. I wasn't getting in better condition. I wasn't learning new moves. We were planning, right? And so I've given this concept a term. I've coined the term productive pause. It's a short period of focused reflection around specific questions that leads to clarity of action and peace of mind. Clarity of action and peace of mind. Like, that's what we all want. Like, am I doing the right things? Do I know exactly what my plan is? And once I know those things, I have peace of mind. Win or lose, success or failure, I can put my head on the pillow at night going, okay, I executed on the things as best I could, and I'm going to do my best again tomorrow. And I can put my head on the pillow and go to sleep at night because I have clarity of action and peace of mind. But you have to ask yourself these questions. You have to say, okay, I failed. What went right? What went wrong? What would I do differently next time? Right? Military calls it an after action review. Right? You have to actually do that kind of. So you have to build your productive pauses in, like once a week. Now you can do that 30-minute planning of my week, planning my week ahead, or at the end on Friday, week in review. Or maybe it's once a month, which I do. One of the things I do with my clients is once a month, we take our goals and we set our micro goals. At the beginning of the month, we set our goals, our 30-day goals that are going to move us towards those bigger goals in those 4 areas: relationships, self-health, and wealth. So you have to build that in. For me, it's blocked off on my calendar the first Monday of the month, every month for the rest of my life. It's already on the calendar. And I make it really easy for me to do it. I put the link to my Google Docs where my goals are. Click on that link. So there's no friction. There's no resistance for me, getting to that document, looking at it, and making quick updates for each of my goals. And I take those goals and I write them on a Post-it note. I've got them right in front of me right here. I got them on a Post-it note, so they're in front of me. But that's so critically important, is hitting the pause button, figuring out when you want to do your productive pauses. I would say the minimum one you have to do is once a month, spend 20 minutes. That's all, just 20 minutes, 10 minutes, even if you just give yourself 10 minutes. That will be the most valuable 10 minutes you spend in your entire month. It'll be more valuable than the date night with your spouse. It'll be more valuable than the sales calls that you make. It'll be more valuable than any workout you ever do, because that 10 minutes, that 20 minutes is going to help you create the time and the space in order to make those things happen. That's part of the process.
We'll leave it there. Jim Harshaw, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, Dave.